Hello, great souls. Welcome to our Living Yoga Satsang talk. Let's begin together with a prayer. O Infinite Spirit, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Great Masters of Self-Realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and beloved Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us in our time together. Help us to receive these sacred teachings, to apply the grace and wisdom within these pages, to awaken to our own divine potential, and to share this divine light, divine love and joy freely with all. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, great souls. So we are looking at the chapter on Babaji, chapter 33, Babaji, the Yogi Christ of modern India. And we've been really beautifully taking a few weeks to go through this one chapter. There's so much here. So today, I think we'll finish. We'll see if we do. The last part of the chapter, so we ended last week with this experience of Babaji teaching about readiness for discipleship, that the guru, the other thing we were touching upon is mitigating karma, right? So there's these two miraculous stories that seem very strange, in which the kind of the difficulty of anyways, you can listen to that if you haven't heard it. But we move from there, from these teachings about being ready for discipleship and what's required for that. And then we move into extraordinary story about the moment that Babaji committed to stay in his body, meaning that he was ready to leave his physical form. So his sister, Mataji, knowing that this was coming, requested a meeting with him, and a meeting with Lahiri Mahashaya. Ramgopal, who is known as the sleepless saint, he's in an earlier chapter where Yogananda as a young boy meets him. His father goes and sends Yogananda to meet him. And he has this, now I can't remember. Now as I'm saying it, it's like, okay. Anyways, we hear about Ramgopal earlier. Let me just say that. And so now there's a story that Ramgopal tells Yogananda about his first meeting with Babaji. And it is an extraordinary story. So I'll go to that. So this precedes it just slightly. It says, an avatar lives in the omnipresent spirit. For him, there is no distance inverse to the square. Only one reason, therefore, can motivate Babaji in maintaining his physical form from century to century: the desire to furnish humanity with a concrete example of its own possibilities. So that statement really underlies why we are honored to experience miracles from the masters. So it's said that an avatar like Jesus, like Yogananda, like any in this particular Buddha, they only demonstrate their capacity to perform miracles, to work within the material realm in a way that most of us, it's difficult to fathom. So they do that not to show us how impressive they are, but to show us who we are, that we are like them. We're on a journey of awakening to our own highest potential. And they they're expanding our consciousness. They're expanding our sense of what is possible. I'm reminded in this moment of a point in my spiritual journey where I was experiencing things that I really just didn't know were possible. I was, so, you know, my consciousness was expanding. That's really what was happening. And I eventually was connected with a spiritual teacher, a nun, who really was profoundly grounding for me. And she really helped me first validate my experiences, which I needed. I definitely needed that. I needed someone who who knew God, right? Someone who had a deep spiritual life, who could help guide me in my deepening my relationship with God, with the divine, and how it was happening, and how my own consciousness was awakening. So what comes to mind as I'm saying this is I remember, it was very meaningful for me. I remember a day I was praying. I used to go to, on my work breaks, I would go to a church that was nearby, and I would go and pray, and I don't know if I mostly prayed and talked to God. I didn't meditate. I would sit quietly. I did know how to meditate, so I could have meditated. But I remember on this particular day, I was just going to sit in the sacred place of the church and just be with God. And I don't know what, all that I remember, this is what I remember about this particular experience, is that it all felt very real to me. So there was nothing about my experiences that didn't feel real. But I had not been raised, and even if I had been raised in I wasn't raised in a religion. I was exposed to Christianity. I went to a little church that my family had gone to, but I'm the youngest of 6, and when I came along, it just so happened everyone was done with that. So it's karma, right? It's, I actually, when I went, I had an incredible affinity for church. And so anyway, at this particular church, I had always felt very close to Jesus, right? Once I even heard about him, I felt a strong affinity, just loved him and loved God. I just felt like, I believed in God instantly. So in this church, I was asking, I just had a moment of concern, of doubt. And I said, am I losing my mind, right? Because boy, I just felt like I didn't know. I really didn't know. And I heard and felt very calmly, very deeply, a message within that said, only the walls within it, right? Am I losing my mind? Only the walls within it. And it felt like truth. I didn't really know what it meant, but it felt true. And it certainly felt like an answer I wouldn't have come up with, right? My highest self, perhaps. And it calmed me. And these are qualities of the divine that Yogananda said we can experience: calmness, joy. So it satisfied me enough to feel like, okay, I don't really understand what's happening, but on a very deep level, I do feel it's true, and I do feel it's okay. And I'm talking about this not only because I'm reminded of it, but there are principles underlying it, which is that, my seeking drew the experiences to me, and my willingness and my hunger to have support drew a teacher to me, and not just one teacher. Over the years, the next teacher, the next book, the next step for me spiritually would reveal itself. And up until the time of yoga coming into my life, and I've said earlier, when yoga came into my life, I was looking for a tool to add to my life as a Catholic, right? So Christian, Catholic, I was looking for a tool, and to my surprise, I could feel very strongly that this was the next step spiritually for me, and that it would deepen my relationship with Christ. It didn't make any sense to my logical mind, but by that point in my spiritual journey, I had confidence with intuition. I had confidence with divine experiences. I'd had enough of them. And I'd seen that they had always produced good fruit. They'd never brought harm to my life or anyone else's. They were surprising, but what came out of them was goodness, right? So I'm saying all these things, again, not just from my experience, but what I've observed in supporting others in their journey is these kinds of things have been helpful for them because we each are divine souls. And I've watched how there is a very personal way in which each one of us has a relationship with the divine. And some things we experience and they're just for us. They're not for anyone else. They're not meant to be shared. They're not. And we can feel that. And that's not about secrecy. That's about privacy. And so it's important to be discerning in the things that we share. I remember hearing that at Ananda, and with meditation and things that you practice, they talk about, here are some experiences you might have. And they caution students to hold them close to yourself. They're sacred, right? And you could talk to them with a teacher, but just be careful about sharing them broadly with everyone. They're not saying, don't talk about your spiritual life. But one thing that can happen, for example, is let's say I have an experience and I'm talking about it with my fellow students and they don't have that experience and they feel like, what's wrong with me? I'm not experiencing that. And what Yogananda said is that it's individual, what we experience, but we all will receive what we need. We will receive what we need. And sometimes what we experience is meant to be shared. It's helpful for others. And this book is filled with experiences that are hard to fathom unless you've had them, right? But there's a power, I've mentioned this before, when Swami Kriyananda met Yogananda, Yogananda asked him, because Swami told him, Swami read this book and jumped on a bus. He was on the East Coast. He's told this story many times. He got on a bus and traveled for 3 days straight to get to California to meet Yogananda. That was it for him. He read the book and his life was changed in reading the book. And so Yogananda asked him, how did you like my book? And he said, I loved it, sir. It changed my life. And Yogananda said to him, it's because my vibration is in that book. And Swami didn't really understand what that meant, but he did know that his whole life had been changed simply by reading it. And what Yogananda and Swami later came to understand was teaching him was this reality of vibration, of energy, of consciousness. It permeates everything that we do. And masters in particular, because of the power of their consciousness, they're pure channels. They're living in the full realization of their divine self. So the power of their consciousness and their presence is tangible. We really do experience it. So anyway, these stories I'll talk about. So Ramgopal shares this story with Yogananda, and I'll go to that. Okay, let's see. I lost my spots. Let me find that real quick. So then it's talking about, it's in terms of this promise. So Ramgopal gets to witness this conversation with, this conversation. So during my visit, let's see, this is Yogananda. During my visit with Ramgopal, the sleepless saint, he related this wondrous story of his first meeting with Babaji. And this is Ramgopal now. I sometimes left my isolated cave to sit with Lahiri Mahashaya, to sit at Lahiri Mahashaya's feet in Benares. Ramgopal told me, one midnight, I was silently meditating in a group of his disciples, the master made a surprising request. Ramgopal, he said, go at once to Dasamid bathing ghat. I soon reached the secluded spot. The night was bright with moonlight and glittering stars. After I had sat in patient silence for a while, my attention was drawn to a huge stone slab near my feet. It rose gradually, revealing an underground cave. As the stone remained balanced in some unknown manner, the draped form of a young and surprisingly lovely woman was levitated from the cave high into the air. Surrounded by a soft halo, she slowly descended in front of me and stood motionless, steeped in an inner state of ecstasy. She finally stirred and spoke gently. I am Mataji, the sister of Babaji. I have asked him and also Lahiri Mahashaya to come to my cave tonight to discuss a matter of great importance. A nebulous light was rapidly floating over the Ganges. The strange luminescence was reflected in the opaque waters. It approached nearer and nearer until, with a blinding flash, it appeared by the side of Mataji and condensed itself instantly into the human form of Lahiri Mahashaya. He bowed humbly at the feet of the woman saint. Before I had recovered from my bewilderment, I was further wonderstruck to behold a circling mass of mystical light traveling in the sky. Descending swiftly, the flaming whirlpool neared our group and materialized itself into the body of a beautiful youth who I understood at once was Babaji. And so then he goes on to share the conversation that happens between Babaji and Mataji. And Babaji mentions that he's ready to release his form and to go now into the cosmic light, to merge energetically with the cosmic light. And Mataji says to him, I knew this, and that's why I've asked you to come, because I don't want you to leave your physical form. And there's a little exchange between the two of them, a sweet exchange. And Babaji's saying to her, what's the difference? You know, I'm the same, whether I'm in a physical body or I'm in an energy body, I'm just as present. So what does it matter? And she has this clever way in which she challenges him. And she says to him, Deathless Guru, if it makes no difference, then please do not ever relinquish your form. His response, be it so. Babaji said solemnly, I will never leave my physical body. It will always remain visible to at least a small number of people on this earth. The Lord has spoken his own wish through your lips. So this very powerful sacred moment that Ramgopal is witnessing, he's there to see this conversation. Another important teaching is revealed in this when he says the Lord has spoken his wish through your lips. What really stands out to me about that sentence is something I feel that, again, I've certainly experienced in my life, and my sense is others have too. So that's why I'm mentioning, because you may have experienced this, where you feel a certainty that the divine is providing you with information through someone else. So it's happened a few times for me where I've wondered about work that I'm doing, and I've just been in, I would say, inner conversation, right? Kind of asking God, asking the masters, should I continue with something? And it's happened to me on several occasions where I would be having that thought. I wasn't even actually I wasn't strongly asking it. I wasn't, kind of earnestly asking it in meditation. I've done that. I've had those times in my meditation with God and with the masters where I'm really strongly seeking an answer. It was much more, I was wondering it. So it was a question. And on that particular day, immediately, someone would write me, right? Someone would approach me and say, hey, by the way, I wanted you to know this thing you're doing really means a lot to me. And I just felt immediately a sense of the divine saying, keep going, keep going, keep going. Yes, there is value in it. Yes, it is there's value in it, keep going. And it always just felt like the divine has spoken through someone else. So I'm mentioning it because it's a wonderful practice to stay on the lookout for how God shows up for you, how the divine shows up for you. When we are seeking sincerely, I was in a class yesterday, class we're leading. It takes place a few times a month. And one of the students, the theme was really talking about divine grace and how do we cultivate, what I was saying in this chapter earlier, it talks about what prepares us to receive, to be ready for our next step spiritually. What's our part of the equation that we need to do? And then how do we experience divine grace? What are the many ways that it's revealed to us? So really a fruitful, beautiful conversation. And one of the students was talking about her struggle with hearing, feeling the realness of God, and feeling discouraged by that, feeling that she hears other people share stories, right? And they seem to have experiences she's never had. So maybe she's defective, she's wondering. Maybe it's her. Maybe there's something wrong with her. Very beautifully, another student spoke up and said, never give up. Never feel discouraged. It will happen for you, right? And we then had a rich conversation as a group in being able to talk about it's our birthright. We are divine souls. So to be able to recognize that within ourselves and be in deep relationship with God, with the divine, is a promise for all of us, which is why, again, the masters come and they reveal these wondrous stories that are hard to grasp, again, unless you've felt them. And what I've seen is that part of the practice is a practice of entertaining what is possible. I don't have to believe it wholeheartedly. I think I was saying in a previous talk about something Swami Kriyananda shared, healthy doubt. So there's the doubt that's cynical, that refuses, right? It's a closed mind. So that message that came to me, only the walls within it, right? A closed mind will see a miracle and not see it. One of my favorite quotes from Helen Keller, and now I'm remembering, so there's one from Helen Keller and one from Einstein. And in this moment, I can't remember which one of them said this, so I'll say the quote. And it is, either we see everything as miraculous or we see nothing as miraculous. And it's about our consciousness, right? The world is full of wonder and beauty. And Yogananda was always talking about that. One of the famous stories of his, he was in Mexico and he was looking out at this vast landscape up on a high vista, high perch he was looking. And there was a man he didn't know standing next to him, and they both were silently surveying the landscape. Yogananda was filled with awe and wonder of God's majesty, of like the miraculous way in which this infinite manifestation of creativity in the world and this beauty of the landscape he was looking at. And Yogananda sighed, and it was an obvious kind of like, wow, sigh. He didn't say a word, he just sighed with appreciation inwardly. And the man turned to him and said, right, like he was also taking it in, but he was seeing something very different. And he said, isn't man remarkable in what he can do. So the man was looking at the same vista, and he was seeing these, it might have been agriculture. He might have been looking at, anyways, he was seeing what man had done, what man had created. It was there, and Yogananda was always appreciative of life. So certainly he would be appreciative of creativity flowing through man. But he just recognized in that moment and shared the story as a teaching about our consciousness. We see who we are, right? That's, as we grow spiritually, there's a student, another woman I know who's talking about she can barely recognize herself because she's growing so much. And she's watching herself being capable of doing things she always wanted to do. And now suddenly, finally, it's happening for her. The person she always wanted to be, she's becoming. And the joy of that, the joy of staying faithful, right? Not giving up. So as this one student was saying to the other, don't give up. Right? It will happen for you. Continue, continue. There's a phrase in the 12-step community, don't quit before the miracle happens. And it can really help us. It certainly helped me, like, hold on, keep going. In the cycles of the yugas, these are cycles of time I've talked about. It's talked about in the Autobiography. Another way of working with the teaching around the yugas is our own consciousness. So Kali Yuga, known as the Dark Age, which Swami Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda, they say we are in rising Dwapara. We've come out of Kali and now we're in the age of energy. Kali Yuga sees things only in a material, tangible, physically, five senses form. That's how reality is understood. Dwapara Yuga, reality is understood through a more subtle experience of energy. And this is reflected in our consciousness. I'm mentioning it. Miracles transcend the material realm, right? So if my consciousness is fixed in Kali Yuga, a miracle will happen, I won't see it. It's a very humorous story that Swami Kriyananda shares in the Art and Science of Raja Yoga, where I've probably talked about it before, but mentioning miracles, it feels relevant. This man is out hunting and he has a dog with him, a retriever, and he shoots a duck. They're out in a boat, he shoots a duck, the duck falls into the water, the dog jumps into the water and runs across it rather than swimming. And the man thinks, what am I seeing here? What is this? So the next day he brings a friend with him and he thinks, okay, am I losing my mind, right? Like I'll do the same thing and see if he sees what I see. Is it just me? So they go out, the man shoots a duck, falls in the water, dog jumps out of the boat, runs across the water, gets the duck and brings it back. And the friend's just sitting there nonchalantly and he thinks, did he see what I just saw? So he said, did you see what my dog did? And he goes, and the man says, yeah, stupid dog can't swim. And it's a very funny story about consciousness, that when we're limited in our consciousness, we see the miraculous and miss it. Right there it is, and we don't see it. And so part of what happens as our mind, our consciousness expands, is we see what is already. It's already here. And sometimes I find in the simplest way. So when the student was asking about, how do I experience God? I'm trying and it's not happening. Again, so we're discussing all of this. And one of the things I shared with her was a prayer that had helped me, which was I would sincerely pray every day. It's still there for me. I just don't always verbalize it, which is to God, help me see you, help me feel you, help me hear you, help me know you, right? Help me see you, help me feel you, help me hear you, help me know you. I was really believing God is present, but at that particular time for me, I felt very distant from God. I was having a hard time, as the student was sharing, experiencing God. I felt distant from God. So I started to ask for tangible experiences. And they came, right? often very small, often just very small things, but they had a quality of miraculous to them. So look at time. It looks like we're at time here. I think we're not done with this chapter, which is, it's just fine. It's a grace for us to be studying these teachings. So the idea, the most important message that stood out to me today as I was preparing for the talk is to be open to the possibility of your own consciousness expanding, that you might see and feel and hear and know God more deeply than you already do. If you're here listening to the talks, I would say, yeah, already on a spiritual path, already being a sincere student and seeker, what more is possible for you? When we talk about, Yogananda's vibration, the masters, they're here with us. When we come together and study these teachings, we're inviting grace. We're inviting our own consciousness to expand. So I offer this for you today to ponder, wishing you a beautiful week, and